Hello and welcome to another Improve Your Chess video. And this is part 3 in the Chess Strategy for Beginners series of videos. And so overall in the Improve Your Chess series, I go ahead and play against a friend of mine, John, who is still improving and learning. And what can we talk about as far as strategy? Well, I try and touch on different strategical points as we play in the game. So it looked like I had the white pieces. I played at 89.5 versus John's 79.6, which is not bad. The mistakes and errors. So I had 2 missed opportunities. But John had 1 inaccuracy, 4 mistakes, and a blunder. So let's take a look at that. And what is one of the quickest ways to improve your chess, especially for beginners, and maybe at all levels? I would say just keep improving your tactics. Study tactics, do tactics problems. But at a certain point, or if you're evenly matched tactically, well then. And sometimes there aren't many tactics. You just have to fall back on strategy, what you know about strategy, and you can be outplayed strategically if you're not careful. So in this game, we have e4. That's how I started. Strategy-wise, the difference between e4 or d4 or even c4. E4 usually opens the game up and there's more attacking possibilities. So let's see what happens. E5 in response by John. And then I played knight to f3. A good strategy, bring your knights out early towards the center, control and attack the center. The most valuable piece of real estate on the board, unless there's a direct attack on the king and you have to take care of that. So knight to c6, defending, and now instead of bringing the other knight out, I play bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez opening. So here there are different options. You could play d6, a6 is a common move, forcing the bishop to either retreat or capture the knight. But in this game, we have knight to f6, the Berlin defense in the Ruy Lopez opening, which is a more of a strategical variation in this opening. So let's see what happens. The knight is attacking. So this is a good opening by black here. They develop both knights early. There's an attack on my pawn. I ignore that in favor of castling, which gets my king to safety and activates this rook. So, if they attack, I could, start a counterattack with my rook. But instead, after they capture this pawn, I just push the other pawn, trying to open things up. So a good strategy is if your opponent's king is stuck in the middle and you can open the center up quickly before they can castle, it might be done to your advantage if you try and do that. So a retreat here, a good move. We're in book moves here. So John is playing pretty good in this variation. He retreats back, attacking my bishop. So I don't lose time. I capture. He captures away from the center. So a normal strategy can be to capture towards the center. But here, this keeps the pawns together. If John would have captured towards the center with his B pawn, he would have a weak isolated pawn over here. Now all his pawns are together. And if you have too many pawn islands, separate groups of pawns, well then it can be harder to defend those pawn islands. But here with only 2 of them, the pawns are easier to defend. So I capture, getting my pawn back and chasing the knight. So the knight jumps forward. This is a mistake. Knight to f5 would be better because here I can chase this knight back here with b3, and John would waste time retreating, allowing me to develop another piece and move forward while he's moving backwards. So you want to try and avoid that. That's a strategy to look out for. If you can chase your opponent's pieces back, giving you time to move forward with your pieces. So first, I take the queen. This apparently is a missed opportunity here. It looks like it would have been even better to keep the queen on the board and just go after the knight. So we could take a quick look at that. The computer prefers this move, queen to e2, because I would attack the knight. And what can be done about this knight? If the queen tried to come out to defend it, well, then I could develop another knight attacking the queen. So it looks like queen to b6 would be best, and that would keep the queen on the board with the king stuck in the center here, which could be valuable. But instead, I decide to exchange off the queens. Now the game's about even, but the king is stranded in the center. So first I drive the knight back to b6 here, and then I check with the bishop, but this swings the game in black's favor because they can just block with their bishop. It looks like c4 would have been a better move, pushing forward, gaining space on the queen side, and maybe threatening to chase this knight. But if we look at the difference here in these pawns, I have a pawn majority of 4 pawns versus 3 here. And there are 3 against 4 over here. But the difference is these pawns are doubled. So with 4 pawns versus 3, but 2 of them are doubled, it's harder to make progress. Where here, I want to, in the future, push the unopposed pawn if I can, trading my e pawn for the f pawn, and start working my majority of pawns up the board. So, block by John. I ignore that because if he captures, well, then my knight could come forward and threaten a fork here. But I just develop another piece in the meantime. But looks like c4 would have been a better move. So now we have an inaccuracy, swinging the game back to white. This just kind of helps me exchange off this pawn for one of his, and my pawn majority can start moving in the endgame. But it looks like rook at a to d1 is the best move. Now the computer's saying this pawn exchange is better. So I go ahead and do that. Before retreating my bishop, I check the king, which is best. We have a block. Now immediately, looks like I should have grabbed this knight. If they would have grabbed my bishop, well, then I could grab their bishop, and there would be a check here. So I kind of misplayed the sequence of moves here. I retreat back first, and now the knight can't capture because there's a pin because of this rook. And this is a blunder, developing this bishop. It would have been better, apparently, let's see, to play king to e8 to get out of this pin. Now, this move attacks here, and I drop back and defend this pawn. I was worried about the capture of this pawn attacking, but let's see what would have happened here. So the computer recommends taking here. So if I do that, I was worried that this could be possible. So if that is played, oh, there's knight to b6 with a check, and then I would be able to take the rook over here. So yeah, that's a little tricky. Or I could just go ahead and snatch up this this bishop, I guess. If I take that, yeah, they take, and then I'm going to retake. If they capture my rook with the bishop, then my rook would recapture. So this is another reason that tactics, you have to study these tactics, because you can have the greatest strategy, but if you overlook a tactic, then the game could be over. So here it looks like they could capture, but then I'm going to recapture with a check. Oh, yeah, it's not looking so good. All right, so in the game, we had this blunder. I drop back to defend, and rook lines up. This is a mistake. King down to d7 would have been better to connect the rooks. So capture. Now, maybe my opponent overlooked this knight when I drop back that it's defending, because this is a mistake. Now I can just take the rook here take the bishop, and he only gets a pawn out of that deal. So instead of that, it would have been better to just go ahead and take the knight and lose a pawn up here, because now we have capture. I go ahead and take, but it looks like it would have been even better to just take up here. So, capture with check. We double the rooks on the open file. So remember this strategy. If there's an open file, it's usually a good idea to double your rooks up on the open file and try and move into your opponent's position. So the game continues with the rook trying to stop me from taking full control of this open file and getting my rook up here on the 7th rank, attacking the bishop. So capture, and another strategy I've mentioned, if we look at the material, I'm ahead here by +3. So when you're ahead in material, you want to exchange off more pieces and try and avoid pawn trades. So my knight, which is probably my worst placed piece, I start moving it up the board. And what is this move played for? Maybe to give room for my bishop and my king to move. So we attack here. Now, apparently this was the best move. We're piling up on this pawn. If the pawn would have jumped forward, attacking my knight, I guess I could have attacked here and then gone after the rook and traded off even more pieces. But anyway, now I'm just ahead. So I start trying to trade off even more pieces. And once the dust settles here, I'm just ahead by a knight and let's see, one extra pawn. And that'll make all the difference. That's enough to be winning. So what is the strategy here? Well, use my extra knight to just pick off these pawns, and use my extra pieces and my king to help escort my pawn majority up the board here. So my opponent, he has to get this rook into the game. It's his only piece other than the king, and these pawns aren't doing much. Maybe it would have been better to try and move this pawn up. Yeah, it looks like A5. They even recommend that. When you're behind in material, you want to try and trade off pawns. So if these pawns could be exchanged off, then the king and the rook could try and move over here and stop these pawns from promoting. But now I just have 3 passed pawns and an extra knight. So the game kind of continues here, and finally the pawns start moving, and now the game will be over here shortly. So check, king goes forward, but we go after this pawn. What's the best move here? Looks like it would have been better to attack my rook, but this pawn would just be captured. So should they try and defend the pawn? Then there's a tactic, the forking the rook and the king. So the knight's under attack, but I have a check first that my opponent has to deal with. So a strategy. When you are attacking, look for checks. Always keep an eye out on checks because they can turn the game around. You think you're attacking, but now there's an in-between move before I take care of my knight here that's under attack. I'm able to capture a pawn with check. And now I retreat back. Now I wouldn't want to, if we go back here, I wouldn't want to just play f3 and protect my knight. Well, I guess I could do that because even if he captured here, if I recaptured and he captures here, then I just have extra pawns to help win the game. So the game kind of maneuvers around a little bit here. The knight is under attack, so we protect, and now the pawn majority will start moving. So, a winning chess strategy, if you have a pawn majority, and especially if they're passed pawns, get those pawns moving and make sure they're defended while you're moving them. You don't want to push them up the board where you can't defend them. So I have to bring my king up here to help. Another good strategy as you go into the end game, get your king involved because that can make a big difference. So now my king's under attack. And this is another strategy with pawns in the endgame. If the rook is able to get in here and start harassing your king, you can use the pawns for cover. I was in check, but I just jump in front of my pawns, and now the rook can't get to me. So the rook repositions, maybe trying to come up here and check me. So this, I have time. In the meantime, I'm pushing this pawn, and it's almost promoted. So now 2 pawns. So the rook is trying to stop, but now you can't stop both of these pawns with the rook. If the rook goes to the side, the knight will just snatch it up. If it goes in front, then 1 pawn pushes forward. So now I just recapture, and my opponent's running out of moves here. So we have a fork. But this pawn's protected by my king. This one I could move here and defend, but why not just promote to a queen here? So now it's really looking bad because I just pin to the king. The king cannot move up here to defend this. And so now I'll snatch up the rook, and we just have too many pieces. So the end of the game was check here, forcing the king, down to b5, but checkmate here. All right, so I'll do more in this series, so stay tuned for future videos with more chess strategy explained as I go over these games. But you can read books on strategy, go over master games. Now, for beginners, sometimes the newer masters from current, today that use computers, it can be really confusing understanding all their moves. So if you are going to study master games, try the old chess masters. Jose Capablanca, the 3rd world chess champion. He's a great example of a good, an incredible strategic player, and you should be able to understand a lot of his moves. All right, well, as always, feel free to leave comments, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.